do networking. It helps in different fields of any industry.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot. Welcome to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka, and I want to know if you know somebody who lives outside of the United States and wants to be a pilot. That's what we're talking about today. My friend Enrique from Honduras talks all about his journey from growing up in another country to becoming a U.S. citizen and how he went about it. It's a great conversation. He's flown at lots of different airlines and is just a fascinating person. So I know it's something, if you know somebody who you think would benefit out of this, please share it with them. I am super hopeful that more pilots from around the world can come to the United States and fly. We're excited. It's a great show. And so sit back, relax. Let's get ready for Pushback. Hey, pilot, did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and going to move your family across the country? Are you going to move in base somewhere, or are you going to go out to find that second home that you've been looking for? Well, I want you to stop right now, pick up the phone, and call Marty and the team at Trident Home Loans. It's an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay. They understand contracts. They understand military. They have the best VA loans in the United States. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. They've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization. I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, reach out, get a mortgage quote, and then call Marty and his team. They will walk you through the process and show you how competitive their rates are. So go right now, TridentHomeLoans.com, and check them out. All right, Enrique, dude, how are you, man?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a day off over here. Doing a little bit of reps later on today with some of your coaches.
Yeah.
And getting ready for LPA. I'm going to be there.
Yeah. Are you a Latino?
I am, yes.
Huh. I'm not Latino, but I'm also going to be there. I say that to encourage both Latinos and non-Latinos to just go and have fun.
Absolutely. ¿Qué tal está tu español?
Oh, man, no, I don't speak very much Spanish.
Okay,
it's not fair. That's not fair. I can, listen, when I'm in a Spanish-speaking country and I've been there a day or two, I can start to get about 45% of listening. But then the communicating, I can get the general idea of what we're talking about. And, it's funny. It's amazing to me to see how your brain starts to form it up. My dad spoke 9 languages and like fluently. And so he could just like roll with it. But it's whatever I can kind of pick up. Nobody taught me anything. I barely speak English, for crying out loud.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of your coaches and Speedfire peers, Mark, he's in the Florida area. I guess we'll see him in Orlando. He threw out a message on the group chat, right? Saying, pick up some 1 or 2 salsa classes, and you don't speak Spanish, but guess what? I don't dance. I can't dance.
Bro.
Like even if my life depends on it.
I will dance with every human there. I will dance all day and all night. I won't be good at it. I'm tall. I'm lanky. I'm like Gumby, but we got to do it. Listen, LPA is going to be such a party. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's going to be my first LPA. So.
All right. Well, that's awesome, man. Great time for you to start getting involved and hooked up. Dude, so we met at OBAP, the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, and you came up and started chatting with me, and I just was so enamored by your story. I actually shut you down. I was like, stop telling me everything. This is too cool. Here's my phone number. We got to do this podcast. So thank you for coming on the show. Tell the pilot at home where you grew up.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nick. And actually, it's my honor to be here, part of your show, because obviously I've been listening to your casts for quite a while. I grew up in Tegucigalpa. That's the capital of Honduras. Born and raised there. I lived my first 18 years consecutive over there. And afterwards, have been in many different places during my studies and afterwards working as well.
So how old were you when you left Honduras? Like when you departed?
I would say 18, maybe
18.
19.
So you grew up, did you know you wanted to be a pilot in Honduras?
Yes, since my very early age, and I always knew I wanted to be a pilot. Nothing else ever caught my attention. And it's a little bit funny because Honduras has a very small aviation industry.
Yeah, I can count on two hands I probably count on one hand the amount of people I've met from Honduras that are in aviation, not just pilots, but just like in aviation.
Yes, I would say, just to throw out a number, maybe worldwide, no more than 50 pilots flying in airplanes.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is.
I want to know how you were a little kid and you identify the fact that this is for me and that's what I'm going to do.
So my first interaction with airplanes was as a passenger. And at that time, you used to board the planes via a ramp and air stairs. And that for me as a little kid, that was an impression. I was amazed by the size of the jet. It was a 737 though, but I was amazed. And the visuals, the audio, the perception of flight, of taking off. And my hometown airport is a special category airport surrounded by mountains, short runways. So when you were taking off, you're looking out the window, those wings are flapping like a bird, like I'm assuming all the takeoffs were a full rated takeoff. And it was love at first sight. And afterwards, I would bother anyone in my household to take me during the weekends out the airport perimeter to take pictures, videos, look at the planes. And to give it a little bit of context it's like Princess Juliana, but with no beach, except that there are more areas near the short final when you can get so close to the airplanes that you can even smell the burnt jet fuel and even feel the wake turbulence as the airplanes are still lining up.
Wild. Tell me, so socioeconomically, like where did your family fall in the Honduran landscape?
So I have to say I was fortunate, lucky that we were, I would say in the middle. I would say there's a middle class and with three divisions, and I would say we were in the middle high.
Okay.
But then again, back in the day, it was a totally different economy as well. So that has changed throughout the past, I would say 2 decades very well or so.
Yeah. And so the reason I asked that is because I'm interested if there's a little boy or a little girl in Honduras right now that has a computer and they popped over on YouTube and found a Honduran pilot and wanted to know how to be a Honduran pilot. Like, what would you say to that little boy or little girl that's listening? Like, how do you address them? Because you're probably the only one they've ever seen.
Yes. So one of the things that I have noticed and that it has changed for the better is during my time in the early 2000s, when I was still in high school, there was very few options to get into aviation. One of them was the civilian way, but I want to say that there was no operating flight school at that time because either or you needed 4 people to start a class in the local air club. But when you got the 4 people, the airplane was not airworthy. When the airplane was airworthy, the insurance was expired. And then, the 4 people, one of them was busy. And the other way was military, which is very limited as well. It's not a large military. So nowadays, there are 2 flight schools in the country, and they're very well run. They're not too big, but they are growing, and those are 2 good options to start getting into aviation, and not necessarily start flying right away. But even if he or she is in high school, there's something to be done during the summer, for example. Do networking. That's something that I highly value a lot. Years ago, yes, I was told about networking, how it helps in different fields of any industry. But as of recent, I can vouch networking.
Yeah, getting yourself in a spot, even asking, do you know somebody who knows somebody? Those questions often lead to a surprise answer. Also, today, for instance, I need to go to Albuquerque, and I put a post out on one of my socials saying, hey, do I know anybody that lives in Albuquerque? Because I was looking for kind of an assist before I got there. And man, somebody popped up that I didn't even think about. And that opportunity, I networked my way into this little opportunity that I have. It's good. It's simple. It'll take care of everything. But it's just a little example of, I just sat there in the morning thinking about, man, I don't know how I'm going to accomplish this thing. I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me just reach out and see see if I can find somebody I know first. Like the easiest step is just putting a thing on the socials and trying to get some traction, but then following through. And even if you don't get traction, being able to pivot and find that other place where you can encounter somebody, going to that airport, talking to somebody that works at that airport. Somebody knows somebody, and that's where the success lies. In my mind, at least here in the States, that's how I do it.
Absolutely. And I wanted to add that you just reminded me of one thing. Go and hang out by the airport. Go hang out at the terminal. Yep. Ask people in uniform questions. Ask even the gate agents. And this is also for the case in Honduras. And sometimes, especially when traveling as a passenger, and I would do this, go talk to the flight crew. Ask them questions. How did they get into aviation? What do they recommend? That's a very valid opportunity to get information.
So how did you get into aviation then?
So, once I knew I wanted to be a pilot throughout the years and started doing my research once I was getting closer to my senior year in high school, and I figured out, surprisingly, the best option for me, and taking into account the factor that was the best cost-effective option as well, surprisingly, it was to come to United States, to my flight training in the United States. You would think that you would find less expensive training in Latin America in general. And yes, there's going to be a few options, but overall, at that time, that was 2007 when I started, paying by the hour was less expensive in the United States if you include the cost of the fuel and the instructor, plus the resources available. The resource available in the United States, you got radar, weather services, and many others that I cannot think of right now. So I did my research, threw in some names, on my research from pilots, right? Pilots that told me, hey, I went to Purdue. Hey, I went to Embry-Riddle. Hey, I did my training through the Air Force or the Navy. And that's why I came out with some options, applied to them. And fortunately, I was accepted to quite a lot of them. And very fortunate also that my parents fully supported me throughout the entire process and paying for it.
So you went to a 4-year college?
Correct.
Got it. How difficult was it? Were you already an English speaker?
I was. And once again, I have to give credit to my parents because they have put me through bilingual school ever since kindergarten. And the context of this is because in Honduras, as in many other Latin American countries, the public education system is very deficient. So unless you go private, you're likely not going to have a bilingual system. So I had that advantage. I had no trouble doing the TOEFL test and any other, language requirement test. And so that was a plus. That was not a shocker for me when I started. And yes, university, was tough. But at the same time, I can honestly say all the aviation related classes, I did very well. I did not feel that I had a tough time, doing homeworks or studying for the tests, as opposed to the non-aviation related classes. I don't know if it was because maybe I wasn't putting too much effort into it, but I'll tell you a quick story. One of my electives was a music appreciation class. I think I got a C or a C plus, and that was tough. I gotta tell you, that's.
Do you appreciate music, though, now that you've taken that class? Do you finally appreciate music?
Oh, yeah, I appreciate and listening to it, but I don't go into the construction and the details that I experimented in that class. I mean, that was an elective for me, but that was like a core class for other degree, in that college. So,
yeah, that's wild. I want to jump back to getting into college, are there special ways to apply? Like, hey, I'm not from X or Y state. I'm in another country. Like, is there certain ways that you have to apply? Do you have to, because you have to get like a visa and all these other things. Like, I want to talk about that a little bit because somebody's trying to figure this out too. And I want you to tell them how to do it.
Absolutely. So yes, you apply in my case as an international student, and there is a visa classification for that. At that time, it was the F1 visa. So you apply, you first need to get accepted into the university. Then the university gives you this form that you fill out, and I forgot if they send it to the embassy or we send it to the embassy as the applicant. Then you go to the embassy for an interview. They ask you a couple of questions. Once you're granted that visa, you're committed to that university for a specific time frame. And afterwards, you can opt to do what's called it's optional practical training, I believe, OPT, that kind of like allows you to work at specific places. And though that has changed a little bit, for me, that interview experience was relatively easy. I don't know if it was because I had my previous history having a tourist visa, that it was well used as well. I hear that it's tough to get an interview date. I hear that those interviews are a little bit tougher. I don't know what's just changed about that throughout the years, and also tuition and fees are slightly higher for international students or out-of-state students, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that's a really good point about there's an ebb and flow of politics. I did some work with the State Department a little bit. And one of the things I found is that depending on the policies of the federal government at the time, opens or closes doors to countries and provides more opportunity or less opportunity, depending on some bigger picture things that are happening strategically within each individual country. And those things are negotiated and part of diplomacy. Like, that's literally how it happens. And so it's, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. And that's a tricky part, right? Like, my dad's an immigrant, and the only reason he won is because Adolf Hitler was killing everybody. And so that's that. With your application, I'm sure you were very excited to get to the United States. Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure to perform?
You mean in the university?
Yeah, to succeed and not fail, because literally, you've gotten the golden ticket to go do the thing you want to do, right? So I feel like there's an extra burden upon your shoulders to be amazing. That's how I would feel.
Absolutely, because not only was I going to one of the top universities for the program that I wanted to do, but, it's expensive. And my father buckled up and he paid for that education. And you know what? I was quite aware of it. And I wanted to make sure that I was not going to fail a class, or I was not going to have to repeat 3 credits, that I was going to make, the effort worth. And in that sense, like I was saying earlier, I excelled in my aviation core classes, in my flight training as well. Not so much, but I didn't fail in the non-aviation classes. And at that time, the economic recession of 2008 was kicking in, if you remember, and the fuel price per gallon was coming up. So my idea was not only try to get my flight training done as quickly as I could, but also I put as many credits as I could per semester. So instead of doing my degree in 4 years, I did it in 3 years.
Okay. That saved you a bunch of money too.
It did. It certainly did. And this is very important for people in the industry. It allowed me to get out into my first job back home and start gaining experience.
You say back home, what did you go do?
So the first job was flying 2 turboprops because the regulation over there allowed it. I was flying the Let 410. That's a Czech Republic built Soviet era non-pressurized turboprop.
Oh my God. And you're alive to talk to me right now. This is an amazing story. Jesus.
Hey, and the other one was a Jetstream 31. So small operator down in Honduras. And I'll tell you a funny thing about the LED, because all the instrument panels, some of them were still in, I guess you call it
Cyrillic. Yeah, man.
Yeah. And the airspeed indicator was in, I think, kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
The attitude indicator worked like the opposite way, if you can think about it. So I remember I was training on the aircraft, because you don't go for simulator, you don't go simulator for that. I was training on the actual aircraft, empty. And the instructor is just like, yeah, you do this and this. So I was just flipping switches and touching things by rote memory. And yeah, that was wild. I got like 130 hours on that airplane.
It's funny you mentioned that. So Soviet era helicopters are very similar. Everything's in Cyrillic, clearly, but everything goes the opposite thing. The rotor head turns the opposite way. Some of your inputs are opposite. Your pedal, when you take off in a helicopter, you put one foot forward to kind of counteract the torque effect, but you have to put the opposite one forward in the Soviet helicopter. And lots of like the gauges, even in the U.S., most things, or in the maybe the U.S., but in the Western world, most things like are off on the left side, and then as the gauge springs open, it springs up to the center or toward the right, or from the bottom to the top. And almost everything is backwards in a Soviet thing. It's bananas. It's so weird, but that's how you do it. So you're at Honduras and you're flying and praying to God you don't hit a mountain. But you're also flying in really I say that because you're flying in really complex areas, like really mountainous terrain, really treacherous, lots of weather. Like, how are you doing all that? Because I'm sure you didn't have a radar.
So, see, on the lead, I don't think we had a radar. We did have a black and white monochrome, I think, on the Jetstream, but everything was new to me. Different exposure, because where I learned to fly in Florida, there's no mountains over there.
Yeah.
And here I am in Honduras flying, on airways with relatively high MEAs and lots of mountainous terrain. Radar, there was not so much radar except for a few areas, mainly in one of the airports. So it was a little bit of shock exposure to me. And for the good, obviously, it was a good learning experience. And later on, they did switch to Implora, and then I was flying ATR with the proper, better operating weather radar. But as you know, yes, during the summer, you do get some big air mass thunderstorms in Central America, thanks to the tropical zone.
Yeah. And if you're flying in the United States or Europe, you're really used to quality Doppler radars. As far as weather meteorology is a real thing. But the further, once you get past the arc that you can manage from like Houston and Los Angeles, you lose, there's very little meteorology that's quality, and there's very little investment in that. And so it's a lot just up to you and your eyeballs.
Absolutely. And I had the benefit of flying with pilots that had a lot of experience already flying, some of those routes. So in that sense, it was not so much of a shocker for me, but like I was telling you earlier, we didn't have those resources like in here, the NOAA weather radar. You just go aviationweather.gov and look it up, look the satellite imagery, look for tabs, look for the area forecast, or pick up a phone, dial 1-800-WX-BRIEF. Yeah, there's no such thing. Or at that time, there was no such thing.
Listen, so for all you kids, the 1-800 weather brief was awesome. And before we had the old internets and the cell phones and things like that, I used to call 1-800 weather brief. I would be driving from like my house to Charleston or wherever, and I would pick airports along the interstate, and I would ask for forecasts for those places during my drive, so I would know if it was going to rain or not. That's how I planned my drive. It's probably the nerdiest way to possibly do it. But all right, so take me through your young and ridiculously complex career. Talk to me about where all you didn't just stay in Honduras. Let's talk.
Yeah, so that company closed operations, and then I was waiting for around 2 months from another one. Got picked up at Teca Regional, flying the ATR 42, was based in my hometown, Tegucigalpa. And that was a lot of fun because Tegucigalpa is a special category airport, like I said before. And I was qualified along with my peers to do night ops as well. It's a captain's only airport, but we were doing that in Tegucigalpa, Guatemala. We also did San Jose. We flew the entire Central America because it was an ACMI operation for DACA, and which used to be kind of like the Costa Rican flag carrier. So
okay, so I want to stop you there because I've never talked about special category airports on the show. And so because you basically grew up only almost dying every single flight. So talk to me, tell the pilot what a special category airport is.
So it's an airport that requires a little bit of, let's say, more skill preparation on both sides of the airline, because they got to design a plan of how you're going to operate, which aircraft you're going to operate into, what's your limitations, are you going to have payload limitations, and also on the operating technical side, which pertains to us as pilots. And in my case, for example, my hometown airport, it's a short runway, 6,000. At that time, it used to be 6,132 feet, 3,000 feet above mean sea level. And some pilots used to say, if you don't get the GPWS warning while you're turning base to final on the 7-3, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, so it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's surrounded by mountainous terrain, and that brings you to the fact that you need to be prepared for the worst, right? The worst case is engine failure after takeoff. You need an escape route. So that's one of the particular things for special category airports.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a little. If you're watching on the YouTubes, like if you are flying in a special category airport, I was just in San Jose in Costa Rica not too long ago, right? That has you come in from the water, but as you come in from the water, there's one runway, it's sloped, it's at an angle, right? So at nighttime, you can get a black hole effect and like this really rushing ground effect. I think it's like 6,000 feet or something like that. So you high density altitude, at a high density altitude, the airplane can get spongy and respond slower. And boy, I found that out, bro, man. But then if you're coming in and you land at this runway, if you have to go around, there's only a wall of mountains that are like 13,000 feet in front of you. They're bananas tall. And it might even be taller than that. And so or you lose an engine or whatever it is, there's a very specific procedure on how you have to put it in. And so in a 757, like I fly, you have to overlay you have your flight plan up on one page, but on a second page, you have a second flight plan up that shows all the terrain around you and where the MEAs of each one are, the minimum en route altitudes or the minimal obstacle clearance, I believe is the one that's got on there. But then on top of that, you have a secondary just in case, like, oh crap, that is a different escape route if it's single engine. And then there are pages upon pages of things you have to read about and plan about and focus on. And some like captain's only landing. Why captain's only? Because that cap probably has more hours than the first officer. When I went down with my company, they sent a check airman with me to sit in my right seat. See, he'd be like, all right, bro, good luck. Here we go. We talked about it for 2.5 hours about how we were going to do it, what we're going to do. And then he's like, that density altitude is going to get you, bud. And by God, that density altitude, when I went to flare and there was no flare, I was like, shit. And like, I mean, it was safe and it was well within limits, but it was certainly not a greaser. And when we landed, we immediately went into a fog bank too, because it's weather too. And it's all these things. And that's what you do all the time. I'm sorry for like kind of going on this rant here, but bro, like Central America flying is no joke. Like it is coming to get you at every corner. So like, and you did that. So I feel like you've probably got a pretty awesome grasp. And also your interview answers are going to be awesome. So you need to like dive in on that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I hope so. I know it'll be like that because, Spitfire. But let me ask you, did you land at nighttime in that flight in San Jose?
I did. It was night. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And my first landing in San Jose, I couldn't see the mountains, but boy, God, I could see all the red on my MFD, bro.
Yeah. Because then you have the typical evening, like 6 p.m., low clouds, right at minimums, and everyone's calling runway inside at minimum.
I know. I mean, we were coming through. We broke out at minimums, landed, and then fog. And I was like, oh, crap. I pulled it in full reverse. And like the captain's just like, look at the center lines, look at the center line, look at the center line. We stopped fast. We'd be like, that 7.5 can stop, buddy.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right on the black hole illusion.
Yeah.
The way I also think about it, it's like the city looks like or the airport is surrounded by like a bowl-shaped city.
Yes.
And that's, if you take off or if you go around, the only way to do it is make a right turn.
Yeah. And you got like 3 potatoes to figure it out, because if not, it's over. Like those mountains, they're close. Like it's not comfortable, especially when you're going 170 knots on final.
Yeah. But then again, it's kind of like a little bit of seat of the pants type of flying, right? And
boy, it's cool as hell. It's the funnest thing I've ever done. I would have much rather have had it at daytime for the first time. Like rolling in there at night was an extra opportunity for good stories. But I didn't even expect to be talking about this right now. That's bizarre. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Also, you can join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance and strategies for professional pilots on the brand new Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. All right. So talk to me, like carry me on. You've kept moving.
Yes. So the doors opened for a nearby airline, that's Copa Airlines based in Panama. I was
Copa,
there
baby.
On the 737-700 and 800 at that time. That was before the MAX time. And I was doing some very nice flying, anything from very short flights to a domestic airport. It was like a 30-minute flight, all the way from, the longest was Panama to Montevideo. I think it was like 6-hour, 40-minute flight or something like that, plus minus, with the winds. And I did some cool approaches, RNPAR type, into Quito, which is the tallest one that I've ever been, actually, myself. And I also raised my hand to go into Tegucigalpa quite a lot of times. And
that's awesome.
That was popular among some pilots, but the white majority did not want to do that. And
because of the terrain?
Yes, because, it's also because it's a short flight. So it's about, if you're doing a direct 1 hour, 40-minute flight, so it's not that attractive A-wise. But
I go to Orlando 9 times a day. So like I might as well be flying that ATR because the 7.5 does it every single day. I'm with you on the pay, bro.
Yeah. So I kept raising my hand, and, it took a while because a lot of the other pilots, they don't want to do it. And I was like, hey, here I am, I'm raising my hand. I want to go to Tegucigalpa. I'm from there. And yeah, I got to do it a couple times eventually. I was also checked into that because as a first officer, you can't land there if the captain becomes incapacitated. So guess what? You need to take that plane to your alternate, right? Either San Pedro or Salvador or Managua, maybe.
I would argue that you are now the captain, so you could totally do it.
Yes, that would be a little bit of an explanation to do with chief pilot's office, but
we call that a carpet dance where I come from. Tell me, but you're not at Copa anymore, so tell me what it's like flying at Copa.
It's a very well-run operation. I have to say that. Like I said, it has a wide route network. They fly everywhere in the American continent. You have a diverse options for bidding, anything from day turnaround type of flying to 3-4 day pairings where you sleep every night somewhere else, up to, flying a 6-hour flight down to Brazil, Argentina, Chile, do maybe a 24-hour rest time and then come back. So it's always fun. The airplanes there were and I'm sure there still are, well maintained, no repetitive DMIs written up, brand new delivered from factory, most of them. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The leadership over there, they know what they're doing, because that airline, at the time that some of the big 3 U.S. airlines were doing red numbers over here, mm-hmm. the airline had been doing green numbers for like 10 years consecutive. So that's
Copa's really benefited. There's a couple companies that have really benefited from the access of aviation for a broader segment of the South American population. And that's really like when you listen to David Neeleman talk, he started like 3 airlines down there, but also the discussions about most of the potential people that could purchase tickets they live hours away from an airport that could actually take them. And so there's been big investment in infrastructure and things like that to create that. But there's just been massive growth. And you mentioned ACMI earlier, which is basically cargo, secondary cargo. That is huge growth in those countries. And so that's why you see large aircraft, you see 737s and 757s, and larger aircraft, you don't see a whole lot of like 380. You don't see any 380s, but you don't see a lot of 350s and bigger stuff like that, unless it's just kind of bouncing real far south to Argentina or something. But then you've got to go from the big airports to the small airports and those ATRs and all the little tiny caravans and Eastern European this, that's, or the others, and they've got to distribute to the short runways, and there's so many of them, and that's like that whole network is like it's such a science, and there's so much growth, and so yeah, you're really in the right spot for being in a good period.
And
go ahead.
They make well use of the hub system, right? Because they're based in Panama, and they can get you from Buenos Aires to Los Angeles in one day, in just 2 flights. All you got to do is change aircraft in Panama. And they have at least, when I was over there, 3 daily flights out of Buenos Aires and 3 to Los Angeles. And guess what? While Bogota, which is a hub for another South American carrier, is down to minimums, and their airplanes are either rating somewhere, Panama is still operating because they're at sea level. They don't have that weather. They have 2 runways. They're keeping on working around the clock.
Yeah, it's funny to see how often Panama is a divert. I want to know, what language do you guys speak in the aircraft?
Español.
All the time?
Siempre. Except for if I was flying with a North American colleague, which I did flew out.
Some Blanquito, like me.
See.
What about Brazilian that speaks Portuguese? I mean, there's enough there where you can kind of get by, but just being conversational can be probably tough.
Oh, actually, if I think about it right now, I don't even remember what I spoke with them. I think it was because a lot of them did speak Spanish and English very well. And there was a large group of Brazilians. I think when I was a new hire over there, they were the first ever Brazilians in the company, if I remember well. But fun fact, at some point, the airline had over 100 nationalities in the pilot group.
That's wild. That is. There are a couple airlines out there that fly internationally that have so many different people from all over the world. And that to me, I love people from everywhere. I want to know all of them. And so that to me is so exciting. It gets boring meeting yourself over and over again,
Yeah, but yes, Spanish and, as you know, ATC, they don't care about situational awareness. In general, down south of the border, everyone will speak Spanish unless here comes Nick Fialka and they know they need to switch back to English.
Yeah, listen. Okay, so this is such an interesting conversation because I'm going off on these rants. Listen, when you go south and you go into the Latin American networks and you're flying through the centers, it's similar but slightly different. And it depends what country that is controlling that center to how much money is invested into those radios and into that radar and into all of the things. And so you could be flying around and have somebody, not everybody, but a high percentage of people are English as a second language, and they are working, they will speak to you very quickly in English. And you have to, I always put my headphones on, I turn them up all the way. I close my eyes and just listen because I don't want to miss something, because there's no room for people to have, you feel like a fool when you're like, can you say that again? Because you want to get it right. But there's a lot of CRM threats there when you have to get used to it. It takes a couple reps. If you've just been flying in Fargo, North Dakota for your whole life, like you go down and all of a sudden you check in with Havana and you're like, uh-oh, this is different.
So that brings me to next place where I was at in Fly Dubai in Dubai. And my very first flight on IOE over there, same aircraft, 73, I landed in Dubai, and I'm trying to, do my radio, and the controller was controlled with an Australian accent.
Oh, that's cool.
And for my life, I could not understand what he was telling me. And he was getting mad because I kept saying, say again and whatever my call sign was. And after the second time, I could feel it. I could sense the hostility from all the way over there in the tower. And then the captain on the third attempt, he was the one who jumped on the radio and he got the call on. So
was the captain cool about it?
Oh yeah, no, the captain, he was aware, that he expected this. He told me, you're gonna get the hang of it in here. But one thing that one of my peers somewhere in my career told me was, hey, even if you know how to speak the language of wherever you're going, or in this case, English, on your radio call, don't try and show up, don't try to show JFK Center that you're fluent and proficient in English. Just throw out your transmission at a very moderately paced speed. Because otherwise, if they think that, oh, you're a local, you're from the area, oh, guess what? I'm going to throw that instruction in like 3 seconds. The next thing, you're like, what did he say?
Yeah, and go to Live ATC and listen to JFK Approach. And think about how well you communicate to the person you love, and then think about how to communicate to that controller. It is chaos. It is, and you bet, bro, that is some high level intensity right there.
Yes, absolutely. And that also goes for India and air traffic control.
Oh,
they speak English well, but
they do.
They speak fast. So that actually backfires on our side, because then we are like, say again.
Yeah, it's true. So, I mean, good for you. The Australian thing is at Fly Dubai is not what I would anticipate. All of my Middle Eastern flying with speaking to, usually we were flying at like 50 feet in the middle of the night. So you didn't need to talk to anybody.
Right.
But when we did, sometimes we go into Saudi Arabia, we go into Kuwait, and it was tricky. But I think in an airline, you have a benefit of having a quieter aircraft. Like my 60 was so loud, my helicopter was so loud, and wearing a helmet, and it's just very difficult to communications is a very not easy part. It's much easier to hear the transmission in an airplane, but it's still but it's more complex in an airplane because you're asking to do more stuff. So it's give or take. I was just hey, here I am. I'm going to turn on my transponder so you guys can see me. Don't shoot.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Are those helmets they used to fly with on the helicopter noise canceling?
No, hell no. I've got one over here. I wish I could show it to you. It's literally this. I'm wearing I think it's Sennheiser headset is what I wear to record. Imagine 30% as good headphones. They're just, it's not good. It's not great. If you're in if you're flying a JSF or an F-18, you're in a pressurized cockpit. It's quieter. In the helicopter, there's nothing pressurized. The transmission rotor is right on top of your head. And so it's just loud as hell. And so you've got 100 million decibels coming at you. You've got this helmet on, and sometimes you're even wearing earplugs because it's so freaking loud. And then you're crank on these old 1980s radios all the way up. So, and it was better on HF. We had HF, UHF, VHF. I think we had all that. It's been a while. It's been a couple days. Probably in that 2007 when I was already gone from there when you were doing that. All right. So this is so interesting. Talk to me about the difference between Copa and Fly Dubai now.
So, like I said, same aircraft, but different ways of doing same thing. Even different ways of how they name their documents. Like, in here we have FOM and, QRH and FCOM 1 and FCOM 2. Over there,
these are all manuals for that you learn about the aircraft and deal with emergencies, if you've never heard these words. Exactly.
Good point. And over there, they have this huge influence of the British European aviation, because everything, all the manuals were like OM-A, OM-B, OM-C. And here I was like in my induction class, the first week trying to figure out, okay, what's the FOM in here? And where is the SOP in here? And which is, the FCOM stays FCOM because that's, a Boeing printed material. But yeah, that took a while to get used to. Also, they used Lido for the flying charts instead of Jepsen. Just to be the, Lufthansa product. And
it's different.
It's different. So
it's a lot different.
Very much. And I can see how someone that started with Lido maybe prefers Lido. I started with Jepsen, and I'm sticking with Jepsen all the time.
It's funny, at the Department of Defense, we have our own as well. And it's also different. It's more, but you feel more comfortable. Like I felt like I meshed into JEPs pretty easily. Like okay, I got it. But the others, man, I was sitting there looking, and it's interesting how your body gets you. I can brief you an approach in 2 minutes like that. And I can throw you a JEP approach and then talk about all the things we need to talk about and hit all the highlights. It doesn't matter if I've never seen it before. But if you switch it up on me and move things around, like there's a huge learning curve that needs to happen to be able to converse like that. So good on you, brother.
Absolutely. And, like I said, another difference between the companies you asked. So here we are on the Gulf. Some people call it the Arabian, some people call it the Persian. Apparently, it can be a touchy subject depending on what you call it.
So I called it home.
Hey, we called it, or we were told, be careful on your considerations with diversion if needed, right? When flying.
Yeah.
Here I am on a flight, and I don't remember where we were going, but the weather was kind of getting ugly, and I said, oh. But hey, I got you the weather for Kuwait. Kuwait's a nice airport. It's got 2 long runways, ILS on both sides. We operate there. And the captain is like, oh yeah, but we cannot go there. And I'm like, oh, how so? Why? And he's like, oh, because we've got alcohol on the onboard service catering. And I'm like, I guess I wasn't following. It was, I was a little bit slow on what he tried to let me know. And it's because there's zero tolerance for alcohol in that destination. So it doesn't matter if that thing is locked up in the catering trolley. You're just not going there because you're going to get in deep trouble. So for me, that's a consideration that I never thought about ever. And this is just some different things you need to consider in those FIRs.
It's also interesting to see how many routes a day Fly Dubai does from Kuwait. Because
as well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that want to go to Dubai because of the rules at Kuwait. Yes, or maybe where is the person from that you're flying with, and you're going to divert somewhere, and that may or may not be. So I flew with a young man whose family was Cuban, and the grandfather was fought against Castro in the Bay of Pigs and was captured and spent many years in a prisoner of war camp, and then escaped and got on a boat and made it to South Florida, and his wife had already escaped. And so after many years, they made a family in the United States. So then they had kids, and those kids had kids, and that kid flew with me, and he was still wanted by the government. And so if there's this list where, hey, you can't be listed. You have to make sure you don't go to these countries, because he, even being a grandchild, would be arrested for diplomatic stuff. And there are a lot of places in this world that can be a real threat. And weird things to think about, right?
Yes. And I wanted to add something, and that's because of your military background. You were flying in that region. So I was lucky also to fly into Iran. I flew, not Tehran. I flew into Shiraz.
Okay.
And I forgot what the other one was, but the other one was this airport where some of the F-14s are still over there in the hangars.
I got stories about that I can't talk about. That's so cool you saw them.
I was able to take pictures of those. Some of them were in the hangars, some of them were outside.
Oh, you got to send me some of those pictures. Oh,
I will, absolutely.
I know some people
I hope I still have them on my phone.
Yes, if you do, man. I know some people that were involved in those transactions. That's wild. This is so cool. All right. So where are you flying now?
So moving my story a little bit forward past COVID-19 and all this, I am lucky to be flying at a cargo operator. It's another ACMI operator called Western Global Airlines. And
in Miami.
They're based so we go for training in Miami, but the headquarters are in Estero, which is next to Fort Myers.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
And I am back on the 747. I had previous experience on the 74, and I'm still currently with them and doing some cool flying around the world, being exposed to flying for the military on some of the AMC missions. And it's been a fun ride, I'll tell you that. I'm very grateful because they were the ones who opened the door to me after COVID-19 to come back into flying.
Talk to me about, first off, tell me why you were not flying during COVID.
So when COVID, the height of the pandemic, hit the operations at Cathay Pacific at that time, and it created a significant impact on the operations. I was junior because I joined over there in July 2019. And at some point, the airline, they said, we're going to have to let you go. And they offered this thing called, it was basically a buyout.
Yeah.
So I accepted that and I was back home. And you know what? In the middle of all this, the positive was I was back with my family. I had about 1 year since I had seen my family. And so that's why I was back home. And in the meantime, I was doing, a part-time job on a customer-focused job. But at the same time, I was sending my resumes left and right, wherever I could. And so Western Global was very welcoming in that sense. They brought me back. They really appreciated my prior experience, and I've been with them ever since.
How did you get back? I want you to talk about the gap there. In my mind, like, you are not a U.S. citizen. You've been flying in Honduras. You got your visa for school, and then you rolled out, and we haven't talked about coming back to the U.S. since. And so, how did you get your foot in the door?
Good question. So I took the opportunity that during the COVID-19 pandemic, I knew I needed to do something. And I started applying for my legal residence. There are several ways to do it. One of them is to do the family option, but you need to have either a spouse or be a child of a citizen, et cetera, et cetera. There are many instances. And I did it through a self-sponsored opportunity. And I basically needed to justify, the government, hey, these are my credentials. This is what I can bring to United States. So I did it through an employment-based opportunity. And initially, I was brought in as an independent contractor. So I was still home-based in Honduras. Of course, I had my FAA license and certificates, but I was restricted in what I could do. I was operating on some routes. I could not operate domestic routes. And that's what enabled me to get back into aviation with them.
Did you hire a lawyer?
I hired, believe it or not, three different attorney offices. And
were they good?
So the first one, no, they were not good.
Okay.
Why am I going to go around circles on this?
Because be straightforward.
If they were good
to this, trying to do this. So tell them what to do.
So yes, because if they were good, I would have stick with the first one.
Yeah.
You need to do your research, and because there's a lot of information about this type of topic on immigration, and you need to do your research on what you want to do and what is reality, what is possible. Because there's going to be people out there that they're going to tell you we can do it, or yes, you qualify for this or for that. And in my case, on my first option, they helped me with the stage one of the process, but I had to be very hands-on. Hands-on in the term of, once you're going to submit your application to the government, I reviewed it, right? And I found out serious grammar mistakes.
Oh, no kidding.
And I thought to myself, how am I going to allow this office to send an application to the government, and the government official is going to see my credentials and say, how is this guy supposed to be a U.S. university graduate with grammar mistakes on his application?
Yeah, it's unreal.
That's unreal. And of course, it's a very costly process. It's time consuming. And the attorneys, I learned that the attorney offices in general, they're not very well at communicating. When you have questions, especially in this type of important matters that are time and cost consuming, you at least want information. Because us as pilots, that's what we do, right? We gather information to make the best decision, or to just be able to sleep well at night. So stage one completed, decided to change to another attorney office. Second attorney office didn't even do anything. I'm not even going to say anything about them. The third one was a gentleman, works from Tennessee, and he solved my problem, because I did encounter a problem at the embassy level. And I thought, honestly, like, my process is done. This is it. I wasn't even expecting what I encountered at the interview at the embassy level, because, I had prior experience as a tourist, as a student, a good record, but the interview itself was, I cannot even explain what I experienced. So I hired this gentleman, and this gentleman is really good at what he does. And I connected with him through LinkedIn. And you know what? He solved my problem in a matter of like a day and a half. He reached to the general consul, and he said, my client has surrendered his passport for up to a month now, and he cannot continue his work, which is being a pilot, without his passport. And he explained, a couple other things, and he solved everything. And that's
Do you want to say his name?
Yes, absolutely. His name is James Hollis. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's working out of Tennessee.
Hollis?
Correct.
Okay. Maybe I need to call him and get him on the show.
Yes, why not? Absolutely. I'm sure that he would be happy to do that with you. And you know what? At OBAP conference, I met one of our, peers and one of your clients from Spitfire. And she was kind of like in a similar situation. And I told her my story. And
she was from another country?
Yes, but she's here in the States. She's, there's different avenues, like I said. But I told her, if you think that, you need to speed this up or whatever the case is, you need to talk to this guy. I explained to her my situation. And, this is what coming to this type of conference is all about. You might meet people that you didn't think about you were going to meet, and they might have a similar situation. And I'm grateful for that friend of mine that I reached 2 months ago. And I said, hey, I need to, help me out. And he said, you need to go to OBAP and you're going to have fun.
Hey, pilot, does your pilot uniform make a short flight feel like a transcon slog? Flight Uniforms have reinvented aviation shirts with 3D stretch, stain repellents, and no wrinkles. These shirts are just plain comfortable and ready for takeoff right out of your rollerboard. Flight Uniform is trusted by more than 25,000 pilots, and their flagship flight shirt has over 1,500 five-star reviews. I've worn every pilot shirt out there, and if you know me, you know I only wear flight uniforms. Be the envy of every cockpit at flightuniform.com and get a special podcast exclusive discount with the code SpitfirePod20 to take 20% off your first order at flightuniform.com. So you went to your Mr. Hollis Esquire, hooked you up, got you the paperwork that you needed.
Yes.
And you paid him a ton of money. And you paid 2 other lawyers a ton of money. No, you did not pay him a ton of money. You just he made it happen.
He was my solution. He was the third one. And honestly, if I would have known about him, I would have gone to him in the first place.
And it would have really sped things up.
It would have sped things up, and I would have not wasted my money with the other two parties. And it's an expensive process. I cannot emphasize that much more.
You think you spent more? Did you spend more than 15 grand?
Close to. You're not that far off.
Yeah. Listen, you'd be surprised how many people reach out and want to talk about this. You'd be surprised, which I love the opportunity to. So I feel like I've gotten a crash course in what it takes to become a U.S. citizen. I've certainly had my share of conversations about it, which I'm all about it. Let's get more pilots. We need them. Let's get them going. So you're at Western Global, and now you are in the process. Your current status is U.S. citizenship status is.
Oh, I'm a permanent resident.
Permanent resident, yes. And then so from permanent resident comes green card next, or green card is permanent resident.
Okay, so here's where I become an immigration attorney, and I try to clear this up as well.
Sure.
Permanent resident is the legal term for a green card holder.
Perfect.
Green card holder is kind of like the slang because, the ID that you get, your permanent residence, is white and green. So, everybody calls it the green card. But the legal term is the I-551 legal permanent resident. That's what I am.
That's awesome.
And now, in about 4 years and change, I have the option to become a citizen.
That is what's up, and I love that. I remember when my dad became a citizen. That was a big time, and then I remember I've just had a lot of people in my life who have become U.S. citizens, and that is just such a fun thing. And so now that you are a permanent resident, you can apply to fly for other airlines as well, right?
Absolutely, because that's one of the most important requirements.
Yeah.
Besides the technical ones, of course, but yes.
And so you went to OBAP in search of that. Let's certainly not talk about who you were targeting, but you did go there in hopes of increasing your opportunities, right? And how was your experience?
It was very positive. OBAP, as you know, but maybe not some of your listeners, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest conferences around, because it's a 3-day event. And like I said, my friend, he's a peer of mine. He was my resident advisor from university many years ago. He's a captain at one of the big three. And he said, you need to go to OBAP. And so, you know what? If he's telling me I need to go to OBAP and I consider him kind of like my mentor, I'm going to go to OBAP. And I prepared also with the Spitfire for that. I cannot emphasize more that you need to show up prepared. I thought that, preparing for interview types like I used to prepare for the ones that I had in my career, that was like enough for me. And that's not true. Interviewing for employers outside the United States is so much different than interviewing for employers in the United States. So, yes, I went there, did some networking, met great people, and some opportunities are out there for me.
You did not get an interview at OBAP, correct?
That's correct.
So let's, a couple things I want to talk about. First off, yes, you're right. OBAP is huge. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. We're recording this in 2024. It's the end of the year. Most of the hiring has been done for the year. Most of the hiring is complete. Delta is not hiring anymore. They've reached their number. United is they're interviewing a few. Americans interviewing for a pool, right? They're giving job offers. You're not going to start until they decide they're going to open their gates back up, which could be at the beginning of this 2025, or it could be later on down the line. And it's just how it goes. There are a lot of people going there, and there's very few opportunities right there. And I was on a WhatsApp chat with almost 600 people. And yeah, you were in that chat too, right? Yeah. And there was a lot of disappointment. And there was a lot of people, man, I thought I was going to get a job offer. I thought I was going to get this, or I thought I was going to get that. And that's not the point of OBAP. First off, the point of OBAP is to help increase the awareness of their organization and how to celebrate it. So that's really the point. But as far as like the job seeker, it's a step. It's a step in that direction. And it's a step that, like, when you're climbing a set of stairs, one step's not going to get you to the top. So you need to do all the steps, and you need to keep climbing until you get to the top, until you can see the top of that staircase. And so you got some good news after OBAP, and that is different than you expected, isn't it?
That is correct. And it's understandable when people might feel that it didn't work out, that it didn't pay off, because you're expecting something in real time, maybe, within the same day or within the next couple of days. Because, and I have suffered this myself, maybe not in a but in general, in life experience, sometimes we want something to happen right now for us.
Yeah.
And if we are open to the fact that things might happen when they're supposed to, and not when we think we need to have them happen to us, it's going to be a little bit better.
So you got an opportunity, you got an unexpected invite to an interview, right?
Correct.
How'd that feel?
It felt great. Yes, because in part, I thought that I was not going to be offered that opportunity, but also I showed up prepared, and I'm not trying to, sell here the service, but I had prepared with Spitfire, and I recognized, some of my weaknesses, and I thought, you know what, showing up prepared paid off.
Yeah. It's funny when you go there, there's a marked difference. You can tell who has been working with us, and it's very obvious who hasn't. And all the directors of hiring talk to me about the same thing. And they are encouraged to get people ready and get people prepared, because their team is there to find talent. And if you're not prepared, they don't know if you're talented or not. And so that's where people miss out, is just kind of going for a dry run. And that dry run, exactly how it happened to you, that dry run was your opportunity, that somebody looked at your resume, and somebody looked at in your eyes, and you had a conversation, and they made a note on your resume and they put it down. And that was the thing. That was the one thing that changed your whole trajectory. And so that one opportunity right there is the thing in your life that it gives you an opportunity to try to fly for a major airline. That's it. So you could have squandered that. You could have just showed up and like, hey, I'm just going to go to OBAP, but then Latino Pilots Associations a couple weeks later, that's where I'm really going to be ready. But that, you'd have wasted it. You would have wasted it. So good on you.
That's correct. And one thing that I have to mention also is perspective, because a lot of people, and, even myself sometimes, we think about, man, like, I got the numbers, I got the, experience in this aircraft or whatnot. And 2022 and 2023 was different for, different factors on why the hiring happened like that. And right now it's just a different competitive market. And it's important to have perspective. I showed up at OBAP thinking, I'm going to think that I need to do that my hiring is going to be like if I was in the 90s, that's my, and I'm also thinking, for me to get my upgrade, it's going to be like back in the 90s, I need to have like 15,000 hours and et cetera, et cetera. So it's better to always have that perspective. And in the hiring market, like, I believe you're going to agree with me, it's going to change for next year.
Yep. It's definitely going to, next year is tricky. I want to hold my cards close as I'm thinking about next year and what I think is going to happen. So far, my 2024 prediction is right on. So you're right, man. But I'm proud of you. I love that you've gone from a little boy growing up in a faraway place to following your dreams, to getting a college education, to flying for some of the biggest airlines in the world and flying the biggest jets there are, and now going to fly for one of the biggest airlines in the entire world. And I'm excited for you. I'm glad we got to meet. I'm glad that you agreed to come on the show. And I'm just glad you've shared so much with us. So thank you, Enrique, for your time. I'm excited. I'm hopeful for your continued success. And I already know you're going to crush your interview. So I will see you at LPA. And this interview will actually be after LPA, but we will have had a great time salsa dancing.
Well, I'll see about me, but I'll be watching you maybe. And I will be at LPA.
Let's go, buddy. All right, man. We'll see ya.
All right. Take care.
All right, pilots. That's the episode. I hope you've really enjoyed it. But before you go, do me a quick favor, subscribe to my show and leave me a review. Give me a 1-star review if it was totally worthless. Give me a 5-star review if it was the most amazing thing you've ever heard. I want to hear from you. So if you can give me a review, subscribe to the podcast, make yourself a little bit better, I will be happy. You'll be happy. We'll keep crushing. I cannot wait to see you on the next episode.